Iran Daily Briefing, Wednesday, April 29, 2026. Iran's rial hit a record low today. The US dollar crossed 1.81 million rials on the open market, a rise of nearly 8% in a single day. On the same day, President Trump posted on Truth Social warning that Iran better get smart soon and that it can't get their act together regarding what he called a non-nuclear deal. Here is what we know about both developments. Today's briefing covers two intersecting pressures on Iran: currency and diplomacy. The rial's collapse is the economic headline. Trump's Truth Social post is the diplomatic one. Neither stands alone. We'll also follow up on two stories from yesterday. We covered Iran's UN ambassador Amir Said Iravani sending a letter to the UN Security Council accusing the US of unlawful actions at sea. There is no new development on that story in today's sourcing, and we'll note it accordingly. The Minab death toll, 155 people, including children, according to Iranian state media, also has no new independent corroboration as of today's sourcing. One note before we begin. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, who we covered last week, is reported by Tasnim news agency to be personally managing Iran's wartime negotiations. That thread continues to run through today's stories. The Iranian rial is in freefall. Iran International reports that the US dollar crossed 1.81 million rials on Iran's open market today. That is a gain of nearly 8% in a single day. The Iranian student news agency, ISNA, confirmed the record low, putting the figure at 110,000 rials to the dollar. Currency tracking websites. Bonbast and Alanchand reported the same range on the black market. Iran's central bank had already reported year-on-year inflation of 65.8% for the Iranian month running from 20th of March to 20th of April. That figure comes from a single source, Middle East Eye's citation of the central bank, and should be read as such. But taken together, the central bank's 65.8% inflation figure and today's single-day currency move point in the same direction. On the same day the rial hit that record, President Trump posted on Truth Social. His message was brief and direct. Iran better get smart soon. He said Iran can't get their act together on what he called a non-nuclear deal. Trump has said this before. As we covered yesterday, Tehran's current proposal would sequence the negotiations, addressing the war and Gulf shipping first, with nuclear issues deferred to a later phase. That sequencing was covered in yesterday's episode. Trump's post today uses the phrase non-nuclear deal, but no intel item establishes what Trump meant by that phrase or whether it was intended to reference Tehran's proposal in any specific way. What the post says is what it says. A public warning issued via social media that Iran needs to move faster. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appeared before the House Armed Services Committee today, his first congressional testimony since the US launched the war. What he said in that hearing is not yet reflected in today's sourcing. What to watch? The Hegseth testimony will produce a record. Watch for any attributed US government position on the status of negotiations to emerge from that hearing or from a follow-up Pentagon statement. Story 1. The ICRC meeting in Tehran. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met today in Tehran with the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mijana Spoljarik Ega. The meeting was reported by both Mehr News Agency and IRNA. The ICRC is the international body responsible for monitoring the treatment of prisoners of war and civilians in conflict zones. Its mandate covers access to detention facilities, protection of civilians, and humanitarian corridors. The meeting was confirmed by two Iranian state sources. No readout of what was discussed has appeared in today's sourcing. As we covered earlier this week, Araghchi traveled to St. Petersburg on Monday to meet with President Putin. He is now back in Tehran and meeting with international humanitarian officials. That is a shift in activity worth noting, though what was said in today's ICRC meeting remains unreported. What to watch? A readout from either the ICRC or Iran's foreign ministry detailing what was discussed. Given the war context and yesterday's coverage of the Minab school strike toll, any ICRC statement about access or civilian protection will be significant. Story 2. The Satorp refinery restart. In a development from 2 weeks ago that bears on today's energy picture, Total Energies restarted the Satorp refinery in Saudi Arabia on April 14th at a capacity of 230,000 barrels per day. Satorp is jointly owned by Saudi Aramco, which holds 62.5%, and Total Energies, which holds 37.5%. The refinery had been shut down after it sustained damage from airstrikes on April 8th during the Iran war. Middle East Eye reports that a ceasefire between the US and Iran has been in place since April 8th. The refinery restart on April 14th came 6 days after that ceasefire date. The two events are not simultaneous, but the restart did follow the ceasefire by less than a week. The refinery is now back online. Whether it is operating at full sustained capacity and whether there has been any further disruption since April 14th is not addressed in today's sourcing. What to watch? Any reporting on the refinery's operational status beyond the restart date and any update from Total Energies or Aramco on the timeline to full production. Story 3. The UN Ambassador Letter, no new development. Yesterday we covered Story 3, Iran's UN Ambassador. Amir Saeed Iravani sent a letter to the UN Secretary-General and the Security Council President accusing the United States of unlawful actions at sea, including the seizure of Iranian commercial vessels. That letter was the subject of a full segment yesterday. Today's sourcing contains no new development on that story. We are noting that explicitly, consistent with how we handle ongoing threads when there is nothing new to report. If a response from the Security Council or the US mission to the UN emerges, we will cover it. We opened today with 2 facts: the rial hitting a record low and Trump's Truth Social post. Here is what the sourcing supports on both. On the rial, Iran International reported the dollar crossing 1.81 million rials, a rise of nearly 8% in a single day. ISNA confirmed the record low at 110,000. Bombast and Alanchand reported the same range on the black market. Iran's central bank had already reported 65.8% year-on-year inflation for the month ending April 20th. On Trump's post, he wrote on Truth Social that Iran better get smart soon and cannot get their act together on a non-nuclear deal. That is the full extent of what today's sourcing contains on the post. No official Iranian response appears in today's intel. Those are the 2 developments. The sourcing stops there. 3 things to watch in the next 24 to 48 hours, each drawn directly from today's intelligence items. 1. The Hegseth testimony. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appeared before the House Armed Services Committee today for the first time since the war began. Watch for a full record or attributed summary of his testimony, particularly any statement on the current status of US military operations or negotiations. 2. The ICRC readout. Araghchi met today with ICRC President Spoljarich Egger in Tehran. No statement on the substance of that meeting has emerged. Watch for a readout from either the ICRC or Iran's foreign ministry. 3. Iran's currency. The rial dropped nearly 8% in a single day. Watch for any official response from Iran's central bank and for whether the rate stabilizes or continues to move in the sessions ahead. Today's episode covered the rial's record low against the dollar, Trump's public warning about a non-nuclear deal, Araghchi's meeting with the ICRC in Tehran, the Satorp refinery restart 2 weeks ago, and the absence of new developments on the UN Ambassador letter. Join us tomorrow for the next briefing. If you found today's briefing valuable, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every morning.